Greetings, music nerds, and welcome to Season 6 of Music Makers and Soul Shakers. I am your host, Steve Dawson, coming to you from the Hen House Studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm really excited to be bringing you this new season of shows coming to you on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. I have a great lineup of fascinating conversations with incredible musicians, songwriters, guitarists, steel guitarists, drummers, composers, who knows what else. I've been having an incredible time diving deep with these folks, and I know you're going to enjoy listening. Just a reminder that this year I've taken out the short song samples through the show, as things have gotten way more complicated as far as legal use of music goes, so I'll be making an accompanying Spotify playlist to each episode, which you'll find in the episode's show notes and at the website at makersandshakerspodcast.com. So anytime you hear this cute little slide guitar sound, you'll know there's a track to go along with it on the playlist. We have some new sponsors this year, but continue to be largely listener supported. Your help in keeping the show going is always appreciated, and you can do it with a one-time donation or a Patreon subscription. Patreon is a monthly payment of your choice, and when you sign up for that, you get a bit of added content as well as an ad-free version of the show to listen to. If you don't feel like kicking in any dough, that's cool too, but you can help by subscribing for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just spread the word by sharing the show, following us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and telling all your pals about it. You can get links to all this stuff, of course, at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Meanwhile, many thanks to our sponsors this season. Please check them out and let them know that I sent you. They are Isotope, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, and Spectra 1964. Hey there, music nerds and all other people on the planet. Welcome back. This is episode number 139 of Music Makers and Soul Shakers, and we are nearing the end. We're so close to the end of season 6. There's just this episode and one more before the end, and then I'm going to take a little short break while I finish producing the upcoming season 7, and then we'll be back. So hang in there and stay tuned. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in and listening. My guest today is the world-renowned record producer and engineer, Bob Rock. I would just like to thank my old buddy Chris Jestrin, who is the one that set me up with Bob. Chris and I have been playing together on albums and gigs and doing all kinds of stuff for years and years and years. And he's my secret weapon on recordings. He's a great keyboard player, but he plays like everything. And now he's Bob Rock's secret weapon, because Bob is using Chris on everything that he's doing. So yay for that, and yay to Chris for teeing up this conversation. Hope everyone's doing great out there. I've been mixing up a storm here. It feels good to have all my equipment up and running and everything that I'm comfortable with all kind of moved in here and ticking away, and I feel like I'm doing some pretty good mixing work these days. It's funny how things like that, new avenues in your life, your professional life, develop sort of unexpectedly. For probably the first 10 years I was producing and making records, I would always farm out the mixing to somebody else. But as I learned more and listened and learned how to get the sounds to do what I wanted them to do, and just gradually started doing my own mixing. And now I pretty much mix everything that I produce. And I don't know if it'll always be like that, but I'm really enjoying it right now. And for the last 10 years, I've been really enjoying it. And it's sort of developed, and it's become a skill that I find really exciting. And I like honing it and improving on it. And, for an avenue of music that was never really something that I knew about when I was starting out or anything, as a guitar player, it's now a pretty big part of what I do, and I'm happy for that. So yeah, I'm right smack in the middle of recording a couple projects right now for some killer Canadian artists who've hopped on down here to work at the Hen House, and we're pretty buried in it right now, but I'm squeezing in this little intro, and this interview I did with Bob was a few weeks ago, and so I'm able to get this out in the middle of these sessions. And at the same time, I'm also getting ready to release a new album called Eyes Closed Dreaming, and I'm going to be heading out on tour in April. So hope to see some of you fine folks out there. It's only Canadian dates in April and early May so far, but we'll see what happens. But you can stay tuned on all that stuff at my website if you're interested, stevedawson.ca. A couple reminders before we get going here. One is for the Hen House Hang, which is happening here at the Hen House, my studio, in September 25th through 28th. It's going to be a really cool 4-day seminar on recording and learning some techniques and bringing a bunch of people in and learning the different instruments and the ropes of recording roots and Americana or whatever you call it, all that kind of cool stuff. There's just a few spots left, so hit me up if you're interested in finding out more. You can get info at stevedawson.ca, and there is a link to the Hen House Hang on the front page, so check that out. Then just a reminder to anyone interested in helping out the show, If you sign up to the Patreon, which can be as little as just a couple bucks a month, you will be entered to win this cool Union Tube and Transistor C-Verb reverb pedal. And I'm giving it away at the end of the season, which coincidentally is 2 weeks from now. Next episode is the last one of the season, and at the beginning of that show, I'm going to give away this Union Tube and Transistor pedal. So yeah, that's going to be cool. You can support the show in other ways too, but Patreon's a great way to do it, and you can get info on how to do that over at the show's website at makersandshakerspodcast.com. And thanks to Jim Sendak for signing up this week and for his support and for everybody else's ongoing support. I really appreciate everybody, and it's all very helpful to keep the show up and running. So, on the show today is Bob Rock. And I don't know, maybe you're thinking, Steve, you don't normally get massive gods of rock on this show. What gives, man? Well, I'll tell you what gives. He's a nice little Canadian boy like myself. And while he's from Winnipeg, he cut his teeth in the Vancouver studio scene. And my involvement in that world of recording in Vancouver came along quite a bit later, so we never crossed paths. But we do have a lot of mutual acquaintances, as it turns out, and we work with some of the same folks. And the studio that he did so much of his famous work in was physically connected to the studio that I did most of my work in. His was called Little Mountain, and then there was this loading bay in between, or there still is actually, and that is, funnily enough, the loading bay that they made all these huge rock drum sounds in. And then on the other side of that is a studio called The Warehouse, and it's now called Hipposonic, and that is where I used to make records all the time. And I also shot some videos in there recently that are all coming out now, like some live performance videos. So if you track any of those down on my website as well, you will see Hipposonic, which is, I think it was the B or C room of Little Mountain, which is where Bob did the biggest chunk of his work. So we never met or crossed paths. We were really working in completely different worlds. But he worked as an engineer for Bruce Fairbairn, and that's where things got really close to me because I taught Bruce Fairbairn's kids the guitar. It was kind of a weird, fluky thing, but Bruce Fairbairn called me totally out of the blue one day. I didn't know him. He just cold called me and asked me if I would teach his kids guitar. So I ended up doing that for a few years, and they were super cool, and we had fun, and I taught them a few hot licks and a few not so hot licks. And that just happened. And I did that for a few years. And Bruce was always really nice and invited me down to the studio to see some sessions sometime. So I got to see him producing the Cranberries, the Scorpions, Yes, and Kiss. Well, it was a Kiss album, but Kiss wasn't actually there. I don't even know if Kiss actually really played on that record, to be honest, but it was a Kiss album. But I did get to see the rest of those bands, like the Scorpions, which was pretty cool, I gotta say. So this Vancouver scene that I'm talking about was totally nuts. Bruce Fairbairn was one of the big players, well, really the main big player, I guess. But from that scene also came a slew of really talented engineers, like Bob was one of them. Randy Staub, I'm pretty sure, came through that school as well. Mike Fraser, one of the great mixing engineers. Mike Plotnikoff. And that whole crew went from making some decent-selling Canadian rock records in the early 80s for bands like Loverboy, Prism, and Honeymoon Suite. They grew into this juggernaut of recording some of the biggest-selling rock records of all time. Aerosmith, Pump and Permanent Vacation, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, Motley Crue, Kiss, etc., etc. It was nutty, and I got to see a tiny little corner of it. But you know who got to see a whole bunch of it? Bob Rock did. Why? Because he was engineering those records and mixing them as well. And then he set off on his own and worked with bands like The Cult and a little band called Metallica, making a little album called The Black Album. It's insane. He worked with Metallica a bunch over the years, and later on when they reunited for a later record, they made a movie of that process. And I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's on Netflix. It's called Some Kind of Monster. It's nutty. If you want to see some band drama, go watch that movie, and you'll see Bob in action dealing with these maniacs. It's quite something. It's on Netflix. Anyway, Bob has been picking and choosing projects that he feels like taking on these days, and he's had some great success with bands like the Tragically Hip, Michael Buble, Jann Arden, Bryan Adams, and a whole ton more stuff. He's got a studio over on Maui, but like me, he loves to work at the Warehouse in Vancouver, which is a fantastic studio there. We both seem to think that it's one of the greatest studios in the world, and he knows more studios than I do, I'll tell you. So, from his early days playing blues in Victoria, to his own hits with the Payolas and Rock and Hide, to taking over the world of hard rock one massive album at a time, right there in little old Vancouver. Please enjoy my conversation with Bob Rock. We have some mutual friends, actually, and it's so cool that you're working with Chris Jestrin these days. He's been my secret weapon for 20 years. We're the exact same age, and we went to school at the same time and everything. And
he's just amazing.
Yeah,
I love working with him. It's great to have somebody of his caliber in Vancouver to discover him.
Yeah. The thing that's so cool about him is he can do all the amazing keyboard things that you ever want, but he doesn't necessarily, like, he's not really versed in it amazingly. Like, I know when he was working with you guys were doing some Bryan Adams stuff, and he was trying to cop the original keyboard parts that were done by Bill Payne from Little Feat, of course. And Bill Payne's been on my show, actually, but when I was talking to him about it, he's like, yeah, some guy named Bill Payne did the piano parts. And I was like, yeah, and it's Bill Payne. Yeah. But he'd never heard of him. So, like, for a keyboard player of his caliber, and he can do all that stuff, but he just like doesn't necessarily know anything about Little Feat or other bands. Yeah, it's really funny, but it's so cool.
And I just worked with him on the Paul Rodgers album that I did.
Oh, wow.
And Paul was just blown away. I'm used to it, but so we kind of we finished off the album with Paul, and it was, I got Keith Scott from Bryan Adams' band and Chris, and it covered all bases.
Yeah, man.
Let's put it that way. Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah, I saw him do he was doing a jazz quartet show that like his own group, and the bass player didn't show up. So he just pulled out the B3 foot pedals and played like insane bass lines the whole night while he was playing too. And like I didn't even know he could do that.
Well, this is the thing with Chris is like, because when I got to know him, he pulled, I said, do you play B3? And he got out there and it was, oh yeah, he plays B3.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guys that are that good at like all the things, like sometimes there's a great piano player, but he doesn't get the B3 thing or vice versa or whatever. But
yeah, to be able to do all the voicings in the B3 and to be able to work it like a real guy, like the guys that do it, right? He does that, no problem. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things I'd love to talk to you about. And actually the whole Vancouver thing is like fascinating to me because I grew up there and I came up kind of like after you'd already hit a certain level. And there's this whole thing of your history before that I'd love to talk about. But there's a thing that I heard you talking about on, I think it was another interview somewhere, or it might have just been on some show or something. And I got to ask you about this, but you're talking about how you were really fascinated with certain tones, like guitar tones, and that you'd gone out and for some reason you were fixated on Jimmy Page's guitar sound from the first album, I think like Communication Breakdown or something. So you'd gone out and got all the gear, like got the right guitar, the exact amp, everything, and tried to recreate the sound. And I love that. And I want to know, like, is that A, true? And B, is like, have you done that on like multiple times for different?
Oh yeah, really? It's pretty much all my favorite guitarists. I mean, when my dad didn't have a lot of money to buy great equipment, so I like had a Kent guitar and I had a Heathkit amp, and when I played gigs, the Heathkit amp was solid state; it would blow up, and I'd have to reset it halfway through a song and stuff like that. So let's put it this way: when I worked, I forget how old I was, like 17. I worked all summer washing dishes, and I managed to get like $225. And there was a Les Paul Standard, a 1960 Les Paul Standard that was bushed a bit, but I bought my first guitar then. I mean, I was totally, from the word go, seeing the Beatles and the Stones on Ed Sullivan.
That was the thing for you.
I mean, well, yeah, it was. My sister, my older sister Sue, she had a big influence because she brought all the music into the house, right? But like for instance, and it's kind of great because like I actually saw the Beatles when they arrived in Winnipeg when they were going to New York. They'd never been to America. They got out and waved, and I was there. I saw them. They
stopped in Winnipeg, or they did a gig there?
Yeah, they stopped in Winnipeg for fuel,
really?
Right? And my mom, whose best friend was worked for Air Canada, she said, grab the kids, come to the airport. So we jumped in the car and we actually saw them.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. So that started it, and I got some guitar lessons. My dad would work on Saturdays downtown Winnipeg, and I got some lessons, and since then it's been my whole life.
So that particular thing that you did with the Jimmy Page sound, because like that's something that I would do if I had the dough to do it. It's awesome. Now, like,
yeah, it's kind of funny. During COVID, I managed to drag out everything. Like I had the Jimmy Page, but I was obsessed with that because.
Why that particular sound?
So I got the original Supro. I mean, really, probably the biggest impact to me were two albums. I went to Hudson's Bay in Victoria and bought Led Zeppelin 1 the day it came out because I knew it was coming out. And the second album is Truth. Those two albums basically I was obsessed with both. To me, they still hold up.
Oh my God.
I put them on. They're just like, they're perfect. In every way, to me, sonically, musically, everything. That's my starting point, and that's my true roots. So Led Zeppelin 1, it's just, I put it on in my truck. I do it like once a week at least, and I still get the same rush I did when I was 14 when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
When I could afford it, I found the actual same model of the Supro.
Okay.
And, so I got that, and I have a good friend with Alexander Dumble, and he's modded other amps for me. And so I said I had that, and he says, "Well, I'll go through it for you if because he was I guess because Jimmy Page, he knows the guy that did Jimmy Page's model, right?
Okay.
So Alexander wanted to know the circuitry. So I sent it to him, and then he explained all the inputs, right? Which I wasn't keen to. Like I didn't really realize it. And every input has a different sound.
Are there 4 inputs on that amp or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Every one you can hear on Led Zeppelin 1 and all the other ones.
Whoa.
So he's the guy, and he cleaned it up.
Yeah.
And then it was to find the proper Jensen speaker.
So it got
and
that deep.
Possible for fun. Yeah.
Nice.
And he put an extra speaker output, so I wouldn't have to change the baffle to keep it original. So anyway, I found a Jensen,
Same era, like early 60s probably, yeah.
Yeah, it was Recone, but that's fine. And I've got a 59 Esquire, with a rosewood neck, which is the guitar.
Yeah.
So I set it all up, and communication breakdown and good times, bad times. And I'm going,
oh my God.
I'm going like, this is it. And then I went almost. And I'm going like, I can't swear, but you can actually imagine what I said. And so I went on the internet, and somebody said, well, Page always used the JM1, right? A JM1 or JP1.
Okay.
And that's an Echoplex.
Yep.
But it's a tube Echoplex. Now, just in the past, I got Mick Rouse's Mott-the-Hoople tube Echoplex.
Whoa.
So I dragged it out.
Yeah.
And the tape didn't work, but it was all about the preamp.
Right.
Put that, and it's it.
That's probably a big part of it.
It is. So I went bam, bam, and it was it.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
But I don't play like him. I can't play like him, but it's the sound.
Yeah.
It's the sound. So I was happy. And, like I've got the, Led Zeppelin 2, I've got the exact Vox, head. I've even got the, the Tom Tom Echo, and I've got the Rickenbacker cabinet, and I brought out my real 59.
Oh my God.
And it's like Bring It On Home with the 15 and the 12.
Yeah.
It's like, see, I just got, as they call it,
goosebumps.
Chicken skin goosebumps. So I'm completely a kid.
Yeah.
I've got all the Gilmour stuff. I mean.
So have you done that with like a bunch of players and a bunch of albums where you've gone deep and like collected all the gear from that particular record? That's
been my obsession since I first started. So basically because of the Payolas, I got a check for the first check I got for Payolas, and I decided that any money I made from music, I was going to buy equipment because I always bought something that would inspire me.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it for like 40 years or whatever.
See, for me, it's like a $100 guitar pedal. That's how I scratch that itch.
But you see, what I found is every instrument I bought inspired me. Like, for instance, I was listening to Natty Dread, and I noticed that some of the tracks that they were playing onto a drum machine.
Yeah.
And which was like, what is that? And I asked people, and I forget who it was, told me. It's a CP78. So I bought a CP78.
Yep.
And I fiddled around with, and I got this thing, and that's Eyes of a Stranger.
Oh my God. That's so cool.
So I was playing my acoustic guitar, and I wrote the bass line.
Yeah.
Let's say it's not unlike No Woman, No Cry, but that, to me, that was the inspiration.
That's where it came
from.
So
that, so I got that machine, and I got Eyes of a Stranger. And then Where's Love? I bought an 808. Program the 808 because so that's been my obsession. And when I started to make some money and I could afford these things, like for instance, I used high watt amplifiers, David Gilmour, and what it was is Pete Townsend was huge for me.
Okay.
Because I distinguished Pete Townsend as a guitar player, that the most important thing was song and sonics.
Yeah.
And his rhythm playing,
Totally.
So many people that are great, like amazing lead guitarists and blah, blah, blah. Their rhythm playing's okay.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm not a superhuman. I'm not Jeff Beck. I'm not, that kind of guy. So I concentrated on being a great rhythm guitar player. And so Pete Townsend was pretty much the guy for me.
Okay.
And so I used high watts as soon as I could buy them.
That's a lot of power.
Well, standard. And, and it continues, like everybody, from Mick Ralphs to, I stopped at Leslie West getting the mountain sound that he used.
The Mississippi Queen riff?
A Sun amplifier.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought he used those customs with the padding on them.
Yeah, but in the studio, he used a Sun.
Okay.
And it was a PA,
right.
Coliseum PA head with the Sun cabinets. And it was on eBay, and guess who bought it? Kirk Hammett.
Bastard.
Yeah.
Well, you could borrow
it. It's this is the thing. So that's been, if people collect all sorts of things, it's my passion.
Yeah.
So, and I found a Les Paul in it, for whatever reason, said Gibson guitar for sale. So I went, and it was a 53 Les Paul, real one, for like $1,200. Okay, but it had house paint on it, and somebody had changed the pickups in the bridge. It was beat up.
Yeah.
So I grabbed that, and I kind of fixed it all up. And then I heard about a guy, and I'm forgetting his name, and that's a drag because he's amazing. This guy in Vancouver, my friend Chris Traynor, told me about him from Bush. Mm-hmm. Told me about him, and he converted it.
Okay.
So he converted it. He's an amazing real PA, has everything. But Paul Kossoff was such a huge influence on me, especially the sound of All Right Now. When I heard that, it was like, huge. Oh my God. Anyway, so I got him to match everything.
I love it.
And it's so funny because I brought it out with Paul Rodgers, and I said, because when I had the opportunity to do Paul Rodgers, I just said, yeah, I'm in. Just anytime. I brought it out, and he said, that looks exactly like it, because he owned it, right? Anyway, see, I could go on for days with all of this. Pretty much everybody, like Gilmour, I've actually got a synthy high fly, guitar thing, which is really rare.
Wow. Who else comes to mind of things that you've collected in the spirit of? Like, do you have any Hendrix rigs or anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you
Absolutely. I finally got a 66 Strat. Wow. When I was in Winnipeg, I was working in Winnipeg at a cardboard box factory because there was no jobs in Victoria. And I saw a cherry red, a candy apple red 66 Strat at a music store. Okay. Yep. So every paycheck I'd go and pay $50, right? And somehow I lost the job. So I paid off half of it and I had to go home and they wouldn't refund me the money.
Shit.
So I just about had it, but I finally got it. I finally got one, and I got it from vintage guitar parts, which I forget what the company is.
Are they in LA or something?
Vintage Rare. Yeah,
Okay.
Vintage Rare Parts, right?
Yeah.
And I just built a Bastard 66.
Awesome.
And it's great. So I completed the whole thing. And of course, the Marshalls and stuff. There's this great guy in Victoria, BC, a good friend who unfortunately has just passed away, lifelong friend. He had the first Marshall, real Marshall.
In Canada?
In Victoria.
Okay.
You know, Victoria, growing up in Victoria was amazing because there was this great blues scene in Victoria. There was these great guitar players in Victoria, Norm McPherson, Tim Zarowski. You know, there's all blues bands. And Paul Hyde, when I was in the Payolas, we had a band called Paul Kane Blues Band. And we were a blues band. We played blues.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned that you were really into rhythm guitar playing, but were you also playing, like, were you, digging into the blues stuff as well at that point?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was trying to play, but I taught myself how to play. So the key things was, one of the things was, Hendrix was a bit out of my league. So I never tried at the beginning.
It just seemed like it was from outer space.
It was just like another planet, right?
Yeah.
But the three guys was Beck, Page, and Clapton. So I just concentrated on that when I started, and and then I saw B.B. King on Ed Sullivan, and I just loved the fact that he played about 4 notes, and his vibrato. Killer. And stuff. And then, and that led to Albert King. And then Kossoff he was a bare bones, like he wasn't particularly, he didn't do fast riffs, Albert King, and he had this beautiful, so those are all the guys. Like, in other words, I went to the guys that I thought I could do,
Yeah.
And then later on, as the older I get, the kind of better I get, and, whatever. It's a lifelong journey.
I wonder if we should talk about Jeff Beck for a second. This episode's gonna come out in a month or two, but I should just point out that Jeff Beck died yesterday. To people listening, did you ever have a chance to meet him or work with him or anything?
No,
really.
He's the only. I haven't met Clapton, and I never met Beck. But I would say, Beck. I think everybody in the world, like all my friends who are good guitar players, I mean, we all just like, we all love Page and Beck. I love Page because of, I was attracted to him because he did everything. He was a producer, everything, but even Jimmy Page, and actually I'm a good friend with Jimmy Page, which is just, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, I can't even, I can tell you stories, but when I was at Little Mountain, he did the Coverdale Page record. So I wasn't on that session, and I was in Studio A and they were in Studio B. So I got to know him. Amazing. And he came to see my band and all this stuff. So when my band Rockhead was touring in with Bon Jovi in Europe, we were playing Amsterdam, and the tour manager said, "He's here to see you," and it was Jimmy Page. And he stood staring at me on the side of the stage. And let's say we had a song that was kind of an A minor kind of changed, and I played my double neck. But I actually toured with my 59, my real 59.
Really? That's brave.
Yeah. Well, I had to do it, That's have you heard the story about my 59?
I have not. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so Paul Hyde and I and the drummer, we had Billy Alexander when we were basically, I guess I was 18, 19.
Yeah.
We worked at Mr. Mike's restaurant in Victoria. We got enough money. We went to London. We went to London to be rock stars. Okay. And the first night we were there, we went to the Marquee, of course. And we could drink beer. The band there was a band called Strider. The guitar player was Gary Granger, who ended up with Rod Stewart.
Yep.
He had a Sunburst 59. The Sunburst I own is that guitar that I saw. I got
Whoa.
it off Billy Duffy.
Knowingly, that did you realize that it was that guitar, or you found that out later?
No, I put it all to, like Billy Duffy wanted to sell it. It was before Slash and Guns N' Roses broke, when guitars went, 59s went up again.
Yeah.
So basically I got it for $5,000.
Woo!
Right?
Amazing.
And then I discovered because I bought when I was in England on tour, I got a 54 for my birthday from my wife, Telly. Okay, because it's the year I was born. And the guy Rick in England said, "You've actually got Gary Granger's Les Paul." And I went, "What?"
That's crazy. And then you put it together. You were like, "Oh my God, that is the one."
I put it together. Yeah.
Is that a pretty original guitar? Is it like original pickups, original neck, all that stuff?
Oh yeah. No, it's
amazing.
I mean, I think I lost a couple saddles because I took it on the road and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's got Grovers. It's a beautiful one.
I bet. Oh my God. That's so cool. So where, like, do you keep your collections? Is it scattered around? Like, I know you've got a place in
I've got a
Maui,
whole pile of stuff in Vancouver.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, like my conversion and stuff there. But it's basically in Maui.
Yeah.
I have a warehouse and I got a place where I keep them and stuff. COVID was the best thing because I dragged everything out. A lot of times when I do demos and stuff, it's usually, I'll just like I have a telly week where I just bring them all out.
Yeah.
I mainly play Strats, basically because I've got a 63. It's just like, it's my baby, so to speak. And the Les Paul, I'm very careful with it now. So I use my conversion.
Okay.
And they're pretty similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're in a safe. I got the 54 Telly, my 54 Strat, and the 59 Les Paul are in a safe.
Okay.
And I just keep them in the safe.
Yeah, yeah. Do they get played at all anymore, or are they just kind of like?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I gotta, I forget the combination. I gotta find the combination, and then I go in there and drag them out.
Oh my God.
I mean, I wish I could live in a place where I could have them all,
Yeah.
But
yeah. Let me just back up to a couple things that you mentioned. Like you're talking about growing up in Victoria and Winnipeg. So you were born in Winnipeg and moved to Victoria later? Okay.
Yeah. So when in Winnipeg, oh, sorry. Go ahead. You were going to ask something.
No, go ahead.
Well, the thing is that growing up in Winnipeg, of course, I got guitar lessons, but I played hockey, because everybody plays hockey, And so I was playing hockey, and my dad, decided to move to the West Coast. So he kind of left us in Winnipeg and found a job in Victoria.
Okay.
So this was 14. I was 14.
Okay.
So we moved to Victoria at 14.
Yep.
And that was devastating to me because I had all my friends, right?
Were you playing? Were you playing by then? Like, did you have a band and stuff?
I was trying to play, I mean, I was playing.
Yeah.
But, just on a personal level, it's like, I lost all my friends and, I was so mad at my dad.
Right.
And looking back, he basically started it all because I had no friends in Victoria. So all I did was play my guitar in my room for like 2 years straight because I couldn't play hockey. There was no outdoor rinks, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and Victoria, great because there was a great music store and the blues scene there. And that's
yeah, that blues scene really maintained itself up into the 90s because when I was starting to play, it was still a thing, and I started playing with Jim Burns in the early 2000s, and I know he spent a lot of time over there too, and he was living there for a while. But that whole thing with like Harpo's and that whole scene there was really quite something.
Yeah, there's great clubs to Club Tango, like great players. All these guys that were just amazing players. Norman Ferguson was the guy that had a 59.
So,
and the setup, I got to tell you, the setup in Victoria was a super reverb.
Okay.
Because it was kind of like a Marshall. I talked to David Vidal the other day.
Yeah.
Right. Vidal, I should say. And he was in a band, Morning Star, right? And he played a Strat.
Was he living in Victoria then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He had an amazing band of 3-piece. But everybody played supers because nobody could afford Marshalls and they had 410s and they could Yeah.
Interesting.
So I searched for the perfect super.
Like a blackface?
Blackface.
Uh-huh.
And guess who modded it? Alexander Dumble. And my super now is godlike.
Not back, like you didn't know him back in like the 70s, did you?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
How I got to meet Alexander is that Michael Landau, the session guitar player, using him. And I was doing Crazy Love. He did the solo on Crazy Love for Buble, right? And, I mean, I knew him because he actually played on a Payolas record, David Foster.
Oh, really?
So I met him back then, you know. And so, anyway, so I hired him because he was the only one of the guys I knew. And this, and he just handed cables to me. He had this whole setup,
the whole
right?
rig in,
a whole rig, but a mic and a Neve and everything. And he just said, "Here, just put this in," and I put it in, and it was just like, what? Sounded incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, he's such a great player. And I said, what is this? And he said, it's a Dumble Head, a 59 Bandmaster that he modded. And it was just incredible. And I said, what do you mean modded? I thought those amps were like these ones that he hand built. And he said, no, basically Alexander started by modding Fenders.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael said, I'll talk to Alexander and see if he'll let you come and see him. So I went to see him. And of course, Alexander, we hit it off right away because I'm a geek and he's a geek. And so now I have 8 Fenders, modded Fenders from Alexander Dumble.
God, that's crazy, man. I mean, those things.
Yeah, because to me, like, I know a lot of guys have the really Michael Landau and, all the guys like, and Robin Ford, those guys, I mean, the Overdrive Supreme or whatever, that amp, they deserve that amp. To me, it's not the right distortion for me. So all the modded Fenders are godlike.
So how does that actually play out? Like you find, say, a Bandmaster or a Super or whatever, or a Deluxe or something, and you take it to him and just say, go to town? Or does he sort of talk to you about what you're looking for, or does he surprise you?
Well, the first amp, actually, Michael told me he has this Tweed Deluxe.
Yeah.
The reissued Tweed Deluxe. It's called the Tweedle.
Yeah.
And so he said, you might want to start there. And Alexander said the same thing. So I got the reissue.
Yeah.
And it's like the best amp. I use it nonstop. I'm in the studio. But I'll tell you a great story about this. I played with this New Year's gig in Maui. For the food bank and the Maui Arts and Cultural Center by Shep Gordon, and Alice Cooper's band is the house band, and Pat and Michael McDonald from the Doobie Brothers plays, and like everybody comes, and they actually let me play with them, which is staggering, right? So I brought my 59 Bandmaster that Alexander, I got a reissue of that, and he made it amazing Bandmaster, because most of them, I'm sorry, but they don't sound very good. It's hard to find a good one, right? Anyway, so I showed up with that in my Deluxe, and they all have Marshalls. And I started playing. I had my 63 Strat, and everybody said, you got to turn down. You're way too fucking loud. Sorry.
No, you can do that. You're loud.
Yeah. Okay. So I turned off the Bandmaster and just had my 112. And I started playing this. They stopped and they said, you're still too loud. So they made me put plexiglass in front of it and played. It's still too loud. They made me turn it backwards.
Oh my God.
And with plexi. Okay, that's okay. I was louder because of the Strat and what he does. Right.
So does he actually does he kind of gut it and start from scratch, or how does he make those? Yeah, things?
he rebuilds it.
Okay.
But you see that he knew Leo Fender. Yeah. I mean, he knows. He rebuilt a Blackface Deluxe. There was a noise in it, and I had to leave by 11, and I saw him at 9, and he tore off the whole circuit board.
Oh my God.
And resoldered the whole thing in 2 hours.
Jesus.
By memory.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a mad genius, or he was a mad genius. I mean, that's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah, incredible guy.
So you said you've got 8 of them. Does each one have a certain character that you know what it does, or are they all kind of
What
similar?
he does is he makes them. You know, he's got certain mods like well, the Tweedle mod, and you know, each I forget. I'm glad he's not around because he would get so mad not being able to remember, but he would understand. He knows me. Anyway, just each amp, all his mods. Like I've got a twin, and the twin is basically the Overdrive Supreme. The basic amp is Blackface Twin.
Okay.
So Ultraphonics. It's called Ultraphonics.
Okay.
And the clean part of that amp is a Blackface Twin.
Like
I've got a Blackface.
Just like a reissue one, or did you take them?
No. I had a vintage one.
Okay.
Those are the only 2 reissues.
Okay.
Okay. The 59, and the Tweedle. Everything else were vintage amps that he made sound great. Wow. Like my Super was the best one I had, and it still didn't sound very good.
Yeah.
And now it's Ultraphonics, and it sounds amazing.
Oh, that's so cool.
And he's got so I got to count them. Yeah, I've got 8. So I got a Champ, Champ, which is ridiculous. I got the Deluxe. I got a Super. I've got the Bandmaster.
Yeah.
I've got a 59 Bassman.
Oh, another 410.
Yeah, which is outrageous. I'll tell you, I played on not New Year's, December 30th, and it was on. We had to face it the opposite way. It was on 1, and it was too loud. Yeah, and then I've got.
Does he put different speakers in them too, or are they just?
Yeah, mainly Celestians.
Okay.
And I've got a Blackface Deluxe.
Yeah. Which
I use all the time. So the Deluxe. Maybe it's 6. No, it's 8. I've counted them many times.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Anyway, I've got too many.
Well, if you ever need to leave one in Nashville, you can just park it right here.
Yeah, and you know the thing is that he just like the Deluxe is a perfect example. It's like it's 18 watts.
Yeah, man. Right,
but it's the most beautiful 18 watts you'd ever heard, and just so efficient.
Yeah.
It's like it's basically how Leo Fender wanted it. In a funny way.
That's my wheelhouse, is the Deluxe, that size and that amount of volume. I'd love to hear what Dumble does to a Deluxe, because that's probably the amp I'm most familiar with, is the Deluxe.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a Tweed, a 53 Deluxe, and then I've got a Blackface one, and those they're really different, but they're
really different, great tones.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah, actually, the combination using like the Tweedle and then my Blackface Deluxe, it's both things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we talk for days about everything. Oh, and he modded my Supro.
Okay.
Right, so that's 7.
Yeah, and there's another one somewhere.
Oh, I got to tell you this. Oh, we were talking, and I said that I had a trem face, which is like a fuzz face from the 60s.
Yeah.
He says, "You have one of those?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, I think I have like about 6 fuzz faces, And I says, I got an original one. And I said, it's like they all sound like shit, Alexander. He says, well, if you let me have the trem face, I'll do a fuzz face for you.
From scratch, or take one of yours and mod it?
Take and mod it.
Mm-hmm.
He did it for Eric Johnson and all these guys, right? It took like 2 years to get it, right? And it's the most amazing fuzz face in the world. Quiet.
Wow.
Beautiful. Overtones for days. It just blossoms.
Wow. So he was totally hip to all those kind of circuits too. He wasn't just an
he
amp
knows
guy.
he knows everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I went to his house, it's like I went to use the washroom and there's speakers and tubes in the bathtub.
He bathes in tubes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Just a pure absolute genius and just the most amazing man.
Yeah.
I miss him deeply.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
You were mentioning you kind of had a couple of years there in Victoria where you were kind of on your own and learning guitar? Is that where you feel like you got up to a certain level that you were actually pretty good on the guitar, or did you were you getting enough experience playing with a band yet, or anything like that? Or
Well, yeah, this is the thing about Victoria, Club Tango, and there was the Purple Onion,
mm-hmm.
and there was the Nine and the Fifth, another club. They're all blues clubs, right? So there was kind of a bit of a circuit.
Yeah.
And I had, we just played Stones and,
So was Paul Hyde living in Victoria? Is that where you met him?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see, this is the thing. I met him when, right around when we moved out to Langford.
Yeah.
And he was at the bus. He had a shaved head.
Okay.
And he was English. So I thought, I got to meet this guy. He looked like a skinhead. And he was English. So we became friends right away. And
are you pretty much the same age? Were you in school together or anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was all about music.
Yeah.
We just loved everybody together, because I was so enamored with the English music scene.
So was he playing in blues bands too?
Well, the first one I was in and his was our band.
And what was that called?
The Paul Kane Blues Band.
Okay. And you played around Victoria. Did you go, was it a thing you took on the road at all?
No, we never went on the road. We were too young.
Yeah.
We were still in school. Yeah.
Okay.
The first time we went on the road is when we went to England.
Okay. And so when did you start writing songs? Was it in that kind of period? Were you still in high school?
No, no, I didn't really know how to write. I fiddled, but it was just, how do you do this, right?
Yeah.
Writing was really simple. It's when I started in 1976. We kind of whatever, we had to get jobs and stuff like that. So, and he moved away to, actually, when we went to England, I came back early. He's English, so he lived with, he stayed for about a year and a half. He came back and we both ended up in Vancouver. So it was kind of 78, 79, or no, maybe 76. I started at Little Mountain Christmas 76. So all of a sudden he was in Vancouver. So we started just jamming and stuff like that. And I had learned song form and kind of everything at Little Mountain by doing sessions.
Okay.
Right. And so
that opens a huge can of worms. So I mean, how did you end up at Little Mountain? I guess at that time, Little Mountain wasn't really that big of a deal or something. Well, it was a jingle house.
Okay. And what happened is that I was in a band in Victoria, and I was working in construction, and basically I heard this ad on the radio on CFox or something about recording school for 6 weeks, one on a Saturday, 6 weeks in a row for basic recording techniques. And I asked my parents, would you pay for it? Can I do it? So I did. Now, so 6 weeks and learned basic stuff. But how I got the job is the teacher, Roger Monk. I was the only guy that always, when he said, who wants to try? And I went, me. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes. And that's what got me my gig. So they hired two. The Sunday, they had one on Sunday too. And the other guy, Ron Obvious, or Ron Mullen, he was Sunday. So we both got hired for the same reason.
Oh my God. So you go back that far with Ron Obvious too.
Oh yeah. So he was, so we both started at the same time at Little Mountain.
Okay.
And it was all because of Roger. He picked two guys out of the class.
Okay.
And realistically, as I say, I was not afraid. Most people are like, they don't want to try it, but I don't care if I make mistakes. I just got to do this, right?
You got a job as an assistant or as an engineer?
Yeah, no. Oh God, I didn't know how to engineer. Okay. No, an assistant. I started making tape copies and assisting.
That building, I did tons of work and tons of records in there, but not on the Little Mountain side. Over on I guess it was I don't even know if it was the B room of Little Mountain when you were there, but what was the factory for me, and it's now Hipposonic. And then it was basically there was three studios. Yeah.
A was the big room.
Yeah.
So you could do strings, etc. There were Neve rooms too.
Yeah. B
was a smaller room. And C was a post-production room that had an amazing production engineer, Dick Abbott.
Okay.
Who was the best guy. It was an 8-track. So, and when I started, we had 16-track Scullies.
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
Neve Consols.
And that's in the late 70s. What kind of?
I started Christmas 76.
Okay. And so how did that go from being a jingle house to having band like original music coming in there? Because there was a lot of punk rock stuff happening in there, right?
What happened is that basically during the day it was jingle house, but there was separate studios. So what ended up happening is Studio A was basically all the jingles were done in Studio A because that's how I learned to record strings, etc. Right?
Okay.
And I did all those sessions. That was the jingle have, and B was kind of the music. So like Valdi was in the hometown band. Yeah. All sorts of people came into B, right? So, and then when I became an engineer or when I was doing jingles, that's how I learned to engineer. Roger was sick one day, and all of a sudden I was an engineer, right?
Right. And that's how it goes.
That's how it goes. And basically, jingles were great because you basically made a record every day.
Really quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You did basics, you sang it, you mixed it, and it was done.
Right.
A 1 minute song, right?
Yeah.
I talked to Bob Clearmont about it. He did that in New York.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A lot of guys did that, right? Jingles, because you were learning how to mix.
So was Roger kind of your main mentor at that time?
Well, there was two guys, Roger and Dave Slagter, both absolutely brilliant engineers. Okay. Dave ended up, he did jingles too, but Roger was the kind of the king of the jingles, and Dave, he recorded Valdi and all those the music guy. Okay. But he did it. Those two guys they taught me. I mean, they taught me everything. They taught me how to listen. They taught me everything. Both came from the English tradition of recording.
Okay.
Like we didn't even have, I think we had one 421 mic. They were all Neumanns. Wow. All condensers.
Yeah.
I brought the first 57 into Little Mountain. I bought it because I saw it on an album cover.
So at that time, was it outfitted with like killer mics and consoles and everything?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, Neve consoles.
Yeah.
And then we bought Studer tape machines. And this is John Vertasek. He was there when we started. Okay. And he is the reason why Little Mountain became Little Mountain. You have to have that guy, and he was absolute genius.
He is a genius. Yeah, he was a genius. Amazing guy. So he's for people that don't know, which is probably a lot of people, but he was a studio designer and an acoustician and an electronics guy. He invented all these crazy, like this.
Yeah, he worked for Altec. Okay. Yeah. Like the JV,
the guitar splitter.
Everything.
Yeah.
That's John Vertasek.
Yeah.
So he, I mean, he helped us all get better because he
was there as a tech, or was he engineering there?
Yeah, no, he was a tech.
Okay.
But but people don't know what that tech is, I mean, that's all our equipment ran perfectly, always maintaining it, always aligned. We weren't allowed to line our tape machines. He did it.
Okay.
So it was like, he was just perfect. Like I said, he made us sound better, work better.
Yeah.
Because everything worked, right?
What was your learning curve like with learning the ropes? Because a lot of people think of you as a producer, and of course you are a very successful producer, but you're also like a very accomplished engineer, and that was your pathway to producing. Were you immediately drawn to that stuff as the jingle work went along?
Yeah, I never even thought about being a producer. That comes down to the songs I heard in the radio when I was a kid. I think that was the interview you heard. Like when I heard All Right Now, I was just like the guitar sound on the radio.
Yeah,
I was hitchhiking to Thetis Lake, and I got in this truck and it came on the radio, and I'm going like, what? The sound. And same with Honky Tonk Woman.
Yeah.
That. And then I remember Good Vibrations, which is not rock. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah. And so were you able to get in there on your own time and start dicking around with stuff?
This is a great point. So when after like a year or whatever, I put on tapes and I set it up, and I fiddle around. And both Ron and I, then they said, you can pull a tape and just mix it.
Okay.
Right. Now at the point I'd been smoking pot as a teenager at that point. And I remember the first mix I did, I smoked a joint and I did a mix, and I thought, oh, I'm kind of good, right? I listened to it the next day, and it was just dreadful, and I never smoked pot again. I'm not a pot mixer. So I stopped smoking pot because I wanted to be good. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's how we learned. And then when punk happened, Ron and I did all the punk bands.
Yeah. So how did that happen? Like, were you in that scene at all, or they just came to Little Mountain?
Oh, no, it's like everybody came.
Okay.
Because, yeah.
It was the place to record.
So, yeah. And that's how, like I said, we started making records.
Yeah.
And we started, like, I produced. I wasn't really producing, but I was engineering and, I mean, that's the learning curve.
What are some of the early ones? Like you did Pointed Sticks Records. What are some of the other bands? Young Canadians.
The Modernettes.
Oh, yeah.
And I did this band from California that were big, the Dills.
Okay.
Yeah, who became Rank and File and stuff.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, we did everything. He did kind of like the quirkier ones. He did U Jerk and other bands and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of cut your teeth on punk rock.
Absolutely. I did the Subhumans. He did DOA.
Okay. Yeah. Amazing.
But you see, but the thing is that, the Sex Pistols came out in the Clash and UBC Radio played all the alternative stuff. So that whole thing just blossomed. And the best thing about this is like, Paul and I, let's write a song. So we wrote China Boys.
Okay.
I based it, I got to steal something. So I stole the chords on 10th Avenue Freeze Out, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I said, and so we put together China Boys and we made it, right? And we recorded it and pressed 1,000. It sold out right away. And we got a record deal on the only song we wrote.
Amazing. That never happens.
Never happens. Everybody hated us because we got a deal.
Yeah.
A&M IRS signed us.
So were you called the Payolas already at this point? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you guys have a decent following around Vancouver at that point, or not? Like, were you playing?
Well, we just played with everybody else,
okay.
Yeah.
But you guys weren't in the punk scene.
Well, we there was a separation. They were pissed off. Well, like every music scene, there's groups of people and stuff like that. But everybody came to Little Mountain and respected us because we knew how to make records, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but everybody was pissed off when we got a deal, But it was not something we planned. It just whatever.
So I mean, that album, the first album that you did with the Payolas, like you guys had a lot of success right out of the gate. Did that take you out of the studio and away from your work there?
No, because I had to, I had a relationship. I had kids.
Oh, you did already? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
very, very young.
So was there not pressure to go out on tour and spend your life out?
Well, yeah, I did.
Okay.
We did. It was kind of, I did both.
Okay.
I did both. I had to do both.
Yeah.
Both developed at the same time. We were never big enough that it was like, we didn't tour the States off the first album.
Okay.
The second album, when Eyes came out, we toured. So I just did both.
Okay.
And it kind of did a transition because, I stopped being a staff engineer at Little Mountain when Eyes came out. And so I was doing independent stuff. So it all worked.
After you stopped being the staff guy there, you still worked there, obviously, a lot. And that's where you got your breaks, like the huge stuff that you started out with.
So I worked with Bruce Fairbairn.
Yeah, so my funny connection with him is he phoned me out of the blue in the 90s and said, "Hey, do you want to teach my kids guitar?" so I taught Scott, and then eventually I taught both his sons guitar for quite 3, 4, or 5 years or something. And Bruce brought me into Little Mountain, so I got to see the Scorpions and stuff like that recording and some Kiss stuff and all that. But that was after you weren't around then. He was working with Mike Plotnikoff. But so at what point did Bruce show up into your life? Because that was a real game changer.
Well, what happened? I guess he was recording at Mushroom.
Oh, okay.
And I think people like Jim Vallance, doing jingles. I became friends with Jim Vallance and everybody. Basically, I guess I was different from Roger and Dave, and I was doing the punk stuff. So Bruce heard about me, because Peter Bering and the guys, all the musicians were telling Bruce, there's this guy at Little Mountain that kind of gets more kind of rockier stuff because he's doing the punk stuff. So he asked me to do the Prism album, Armageddon.
And for people that don't know, Bruce Fairbairn was the trumpet player and producer for Prism.
So basically, I did the Prism album,
okay.
And then after the Prism album, it was the first Loverboy album.
And you were strictly engineering those records.
Yeah, then I was strictly engineering, but still in the Payolas, But I was, like I said, we had moderate success, so we couldn't make a living with the Payolas. So we played when we could and stuff. So yeah, and then from Loverboy, Bruce and I had a great run. Yeah.
So what was that like in the early days? What was that working relationship like? Was it a good
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, I was learning to be an engineer while I was making those records. Yeah. And basically I learned a lot from like Paul Dean, busted my balls nonstop, but he made me being a better engineer.
In what way? Like, what did he do that you?
Well, he said, this is like I just learned all these things about, like, Paul came in and he had this Marshall cabinet and he had a high watt head and he made his guitar and he said, this is my guitar sound, record it. Whereas we had amps and stuff in the studios and guys would use them, right? Yeah. But Paul said, this is my sound. Record it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he was just pushing me. And all those years, right up as an engineer, they all challenged me. And the challenges always made me want to be better. All those people are huge influences in my life, in terms of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't feel good when they're doing that, but it makes you work. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the work ethic involved, because I know that those records were done, like, you guys were working insanely long hours, and it was a different era, of course, and people don't make records like that anymore, really, at all. And you were working to tape. So, I mean, I know that it evolved to the point where, the amount of editing that you must have been doing, and the amount of I don't know how much like comping and things like that were involved with all the tracks that were going on, because that stuff was like epic, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it developed. When I was working with Bruce, it was 24 track and then was 48. And like, the great thing about Bruce, he had a great work ethic. He didn't do the long hours. We started at a decent hour, and he went for dinner at home, came back, and we worked for a couple hours. So and actually a lot of bands freaked out by that, but that made them, it's like he was a great leader.
Yeah.
And the fact that, it's like he worked with all these bands, but he wasn't fans of the bands. He just knew how to do it. Do you follow me?
Interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even, even with Metallica with me, I mean, I knew about them, but I wasn't a fan.
Okay.
I knew about them. And I was interested, but so in other words, they were just people.
Right.
No, so when
that
we
kind of
did
helps
Aerosmith,
in a way.
Yeah, but for him, when Aerosmith, I'm going like, oh my God.
That's different.
Right. Yeah. He's going like, Steven, we're in the middle of a vocal, and he goes, well, I'm going for dinner. I just walked out, right? Like, I could never do that. So I just hung with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you see, that discipline helped Bon Jovi and all those bands.
So you engineered like Slippery When Wet, and you mixed that too?
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are like, some of those records and the Metallica record, obviously, like, those are some of the biggest selling records of all time. But at the time, of course, like, Bon Jovi was probably like, they were sort of like on the verge of being dropped, I think, before Slippery When Wet came out, or they definitely weren't, like, that record catapulted them. And the Aerosmith record, Aerosmith was in probably like sort of what you would call a career slump, I would guess, at that point.
Yeah.
How did you feel as a engineer and a mix engineer? Because you didn't have a ton of experience like with mainstream big time acts like that. Was it intimidating and freaky?
Well, there's a reason why we got Bon Jovi is we did a Honeymoon Suite album.
And they liked it.
And Richie heard the Honeymoon Suite album and told John, we got to get these two guys because listen to this record.
Okay. And so tell me about your mixing life in those days. Like, how long were you spending mixing a record like that?
I mean, back then, like for instance, the Bon Jovi album was 6 weeks total, record and mix,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
Which is very quick.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really, I think it's always been like a day. We probably work on it a day and do touch-ups the morning of the second day and then do another one.
Yeah.
I think that's how it went. Sometimes it'd be two, depends on the material.
Okay. And you were mixing on the SSL or a Neve or
no, it was SSL.
And to tape, from tape to tape, of course.
To tape. Yeah. It's like the thing is that, and what I've discovered, I'm going slightly off track of what you're talking about, but this is an interesting thing. So I work with, maybe 8 years ago, I worked with a band called American Bang, who turned into a great Nashville band, Cadillac 3, right? Jaron Johnson, right? So I was mixing the album and I was by myself and I thought, I wonder if I'm better. Like, so I put on Working for the Weekend. Okay. Mm-hmm. And compared it, and sonically it sounded exactly the same. It's perspective wise. And that's when I realized is what my perspective, the way I hear music, which comes from all the influences I have, people just like that perspective. And I think Bon Jovi, that was my perspective. Like I really didn't know what I was doing. Like there was no method.
Yeah.
I was just, that's the way I heard rock.
Yeah.
So I guess I was lucky. And it was all that, I guess, the love of records, right? Mm-hmm. Previously to that formed that perspective.
It's just amazing to me that you were able to pull that off. Like, I don't mean that in any bad way. I just mean like you were pretty young and like didn't have a ton of experience. And those are hallmark rock and roll records. They're massive. It's crazy to me.
Well, yeah, but the thing is what you learn is that you're part of the picture. Like, in other words, Slippery sounds great because the songs were great. The band were seasoned players. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Tico Torres, it was easy to get a drum sound. Matt Frenette, it's easy because they're great players. Right. Do you know what I mean? You learn that. Do you follow me? Yeah. It's almost like when I first started, I EQ'd too much when I recorded.
Okay.
And I stopped, I started mic technique. A big thing was when Clear Mountain came to Little Mountain and recorded Adams. As soon as they left, I was in the studio looking at what he did.
Oh, so you learned a lot from him.
I told him, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was this great competition with engineers and mixers in those days, right? There wasn't that thing of one guy mixes everything, it's like we're all competing because there was no kind of standard, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to do, like, Ron and I were just completely obsessed with like the English records, and we got an SSL. I mean, I don't even know what the setting on the bus compressor was on Slippery. I can't even remember. I was fooling around.
Amazing. Was there ever any talk of like bringing in a seasoned veteran to produce those records?
No.
You just had the gig and
No. Well, I mean, Bruce, they thought we were seasoned. Well, you see that in those days, if you did a great record, people noticed.
Right.
And then they go, I want to use these people.
Yeah. Which is kind of how things happen anyway. Like that, I know, like working with Motley Crue kind of led to Metallica, right? Because they dug the sound of that Motley Crue record.
Oh, yeah.
That's just sort of how it
works. They
didn't
do it because they liked the music. They did it. They liked the sonics.
Yeah.
And once again, the sonics of Dr. Feelgood is Tommy Lee challenging me.
Right. Yeah. So you were doing like some pretty early drum replacement on that.
Well, the only way to get what he wanted was samples came out because the DMX had a sampler thing. The Eventide DMX, the delay, you could sample.
Yeah.
So we figured out how to do it. And the great thing about that, they had the harmonizer section. So you could actually detune the sample.
Oh.
Yeah, you could bring it down. So we put it in. And so I could detune a kick drum.
Yeah.
Right? Down. But we were just trying things. but it's because he said rap had just started, and he said, I want a rap kick. And I'm going like, how do you do that? But the thing is the other thing is that was interesting is he wanted bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when I was in rehearsal with him, he had subs. He had subs
that he was
by the drum,
pumping his own kit.
Yeah,
okay.
he had a thumper, and it was like he played, and so I went and hit his kick drum, and I thought my kidneys were going to fall out. Yeah. And so basically what ended up happening, I said, well, I remember when I did this, and he told me, well, we had the subs. And so what I did is I actually, John Vertasek thought I was crazy. I said, well, let's just get subs and set them up behind Tom.
And mic them.
No, we didn't mic them. It just, it bled into the drums in the room.
Oh, okay.
And of course it started off as being woo.
Right.
And so, but we found the sweet spot, right? And all of a sudden, so we put the toms and the kick drum in. So they had this weight to them.
So that was going down live. And then you were also sampling off the AMS and then blending that in as well?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody was doing that shit back then, were they?
I don't know.
Because like everyone does it now, but.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like I said, it's I mean, Tommy, in terms of drum sounds, you know, he was obsessed, like, you know, it just becomes the people that you're with, you know.
Yeah.
He, like I said, well, before this, I did Kingdom Come. That's the first album I did when I left Bruce, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, by then Clear Mountain showed us the loading bay at Little Mountain. So I learned how to get ambience, and, you know, I just learned how to make drums sound like what we thought was Led Zeppelin.
Can I just quickly intervene and just ask you about that loading bay? I know the loading bay really well because the loading bay was sort of the divider between the room you worked in and the room that I worked in a lot, probably 15 years after you were there a lot. But so what were you doing exactly? That was your reverb chamber for the whole kit, or what?
No, what it was is Ron and I would put drums in the loading bay.
Oh, they'd actually be in there.
Well, that's what we thought that's what we thought they were doing.
Oh.
Right. But when Clear Mountain came, he had the drums in, they opened the door.
Okay.
And he had mics in, so he used it as a chamber.
Right.
And we're going like, that's brilliant. But that's what he did at the power station.
Okay.
They had a stairwell.
Yep.
Same thing, right?
Yeah.
So that ambience and then that, you know, and double miking the toms, one on top and the bottom and out of phase.
Oh, that's a thing. That's your thing too.
Well, I tried it, and it's just, I mean, I couldn't do it no other way. What it does is but there's a history to all of that. Is that a lot of the Beatles stuff, they actually mic drums from the bottom.
Really?
Like Abbey Road,
mm-hmm.
The mics were underneath the toms.
Okay.
Because they had the one mic at top.
Yep.
So to bring it, they didn't put them on the top, they put them on the bottom.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
So somehow Clear Mountain did that. And basically, instead of using noise gates, because of what happens with the phasing and stuff, you put the mics out of phase, right?
Yep.
All of a sudden you have this core of a tom that sounds really real without any EQ.
Right. And when you track that, do you bust those onto one channel and that becomes the tom sound, or do you separate them out?
No.
Okay.
Well, back then at that point we were using, it was analog. So we just recorded all the tracks, and then we'd make stems,
mm-hmm.
mix it, and then we'd overdub on another 24. And then when we mix, we'd sync them.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, that's all stealing, right? And it's so funny, you know, getting to know Bob, and everybody did that. Like I said,
of course.
It's like,
how else are you going to do it?
Like how is it the way he mic, you know, different mics position?
Yeah.
He was the first guy that I ever saw use two mics on a snare drum.
Okay.
So I tried it, and now I know why, and I still do it.
What was your transition to producing? So you're working with Bruce and like making all these hit records, and there must have been a huge demand for you to just continue doing that forever. I mean,
well, you know, the protocol of engineers at that point, it was like, you know, with Bruce, I never said anything for the most part.
Right. You're a silent
But then when
partner.
we got to be friends and stuff, I started not suggesting things, but suggesting things, mm-hmm. you know, and he asked me and stuff. So it became a very good relationship. And then, and really what I decided is that I'd made enough records and just engineering and mixing it wasn't enough. Like I saw what producing was.
Mm-hmm.
And in a funny way, I didn't agree with what some of the production that he was doing. You know, you just start forming opinions and you learn and you learn how to make records and produce.
Yeah.
Been in the rooms, you know, quietly being in the rooms and soaking everything in. And then, you know, we separated. There was a bit of a financial thing that happened.
Oh, really?
I'm not going to get into the details.
Yeah.
You know, like basically, I can tell you simply that Slippery, I got paid 10 grand Canadian,
Ooh, okay.
which is right. Okay. And I know I found out that all the other engineers in America was getting like 20,000 American.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I did permanent vacation, he cut my wages to 8 grand Canadian.
Wow.
That's you're kind of going like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it just got to be like, I went, this is not, I'm not going to get anywhere here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I felt confident by doing the punk records and learning how to make records and producing Payolas and everything. It's just like, you know, as a person, I just went, I just can't do this anymore.
So there was a split, like you actually left at some point.
Oh yeah.
And did you have work to go to? Like, did you have a production gig waiting for you or not?
Yeah, Kingdom Come.
Okay.
The A&R for Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
He knew Derek Schulman. He was always there and he just saw what I did. So he says, you want to do this young band? I said, sure.
And you did that at Little Mountain?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did some stuff at Electric 80, both places.
Oh, cool. So in those days, did you do a lot of stuff that wasn't in Little Mountain, or was that pretty much your base for everything?
Well, I first started, Bruce and I started traveling. We did Crocus and different stuff in New York.
Okay.
And we did Honeymoon Suite in back east and stuff. So I started working in other studios.
Yeah.
And then you realize how good Little Mountain was. Do you know what I mean? It was difficult.
Yeah. I mean, what was it about that place that was so special for you guys? Because obviously, like, people just kept coming back there, but really, like, when you look at it, it just seems like it's nothing special.
But this is the point: is that you know, Little Mountain, like, we changed the monitor speakers. John says these, you know, we got Yuri Timelines instead of these, you know, like 4-way JBLs that didn't represent anything when you took it out of it, right? So basically, you know, Roger, Dave, Ron and I, John Vertasek, we just started adapting everything. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You just start finessing everything and it turns into what it became.
Right.
You know, just constant adjustment, listening to records. What are they doing? You know, and John always had the solution and told us, right?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, like everybody that came out alone, we all use Studer amps on Yamahas, right? And everybody goes, why Studers? Well, we got every power amp ever made and we did it AB, and the Studer, all of a sudden, we're just going like this, hands down. And what it is, so many people under power NS10s.
Right.
And Studer are so clean. And anybody that ever hears NS10s through a Studer, they go like, why haven't we been doing this? And that's John Studer, right? He comes from that European. They're so clean, and you know they're 300 watts a side.
That's a lot.
So
of power.
There was headroom, right? Most people, like, you know, they're small speakers, so they used like 60-watt amps, which would distort. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
totally.
Like I said, all those things come into play. Like we had the wooden NS10s that we had. Kleenex on top of the tweeters, right. And then the pro ones came. This all was happening and forming and changing.
Yeah,
all of us were learning together, right?
Yeah, I guess my point is just that without you and Vertasek and Ron Obvious, Little Mountain really just becomes something that's not like anything spectacular. It's just another room.
Well, yeah, but you don't even think about it. You know what I mean? It was just, you just do, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what you're doing. I'll never forget when I mixed Slippery and I was doing something else and somebody said, Jimmy Iovine and Shelley Ackes want to talk to you. They're on the phone. And I'm going like, and they said, what did you do on Slippery? And I said, well, this is what I do.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what I mean? And anyway, so
what were they fishing for? They wanted answers.
I guess they just wanted to know what I used. So I told them what I used, because everybody was using the same stuff. This is the key. They all use Neve and, the same mics that we used in different rooms and stuff. And it comes down to that perspective. It's always about that perspective, which of course at that point I didn't realize.
Yeah.
But that's the way I heard music.
Yes.
That's the most important thing, is that what you do is you learn what you through your taste and your experiences. This is the way I hear music.
So when you were working with some of these bands that had, it's such a different era, and an era that I was not involved in, where these bands would have these astronomical budgets to spend huge amounts of time in the studio. Like, for example, that Motley Crue album, I can imagine must have had a massive budget. Or was that the kind of thing where it just like ballooned?
It was 2 months.
Okay. I thought that one took years.
Oh God, no.
Okay, so that was a couple months.
It was slightly longer than Bon Jovi.
Okay,
I'd say it was about 2 months.
Oh, okay.
The longest album, of course, is the Black Album.
So that one comes around, and as you mentioned, it wasn't like you were a huge Metallica fan, but they were as big as you can get for a thrash metal band at that time, probably. But you sort of kicked them into a different stratosphere. That was controversial.
A series of events, basically. The Cult were the opening band on the Justice tour.
Yeah.
And so I went to see Billy and Ian in the band, and I stayed and watched Metallica. Now, of course, I bought Justice, and I saw all the T-shirts. And actually, when I was doing a band called Black and Blue, one of the guys was friends with Lars. Okay. So they took the night off to go see them at a small hall. And so I knew about them.
Yeah.
And when I saw them live, I had the Justice album, which I didn't think sounded very good.
Yeah.
And I saw them live and I went, oh my God, they're nothing like that album. They're this big, huge, monstrous, weighty band. And then because of Motley, they asked me if I wanted to mix the record. And I said no. I said, but I'll produce it. The Black Album. They wanted me, they were going to record it with Fleming or whatever.
Okay.
Right? And just mix it. I said, no, I'm not interested. I said, but I'll produce it with you.
That's ballsy.
Well, yeah, but it was at that point, it didn't mean anything to me. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I knew of them, but it wasn't like I got to do it because it's based on the music I heard on Justice. I liked one. Yeah. Basically, I got one. And then basically they came up to Vancouver and played me their demos. Mm-hmm. And basically the demos are the album. Oh, yeah. Everybody thinks I changed them. But really, I heard Sandman. They didn't have vocals, right? Mm-hmm. And then when I heard Sabbath True, I went, well, that's Kashmir. I can do this. Right. Like, it was different. It wasn't algebra anymore. Uh-huh. There were songs, right? So I went, I can do this.
Okay. And you guys just agreed to work together. And that was sort of a trying experience, I guess, because there was a lot of infighting and there was some resistance to your approach or something, from what I understand. Or
perspective, what I learned about it is it was all different. I'd never been with people so intense. Okay.
They seem really intense. Yeah.
Well, really intense, and just this, it wasn't fun. Okay. But I was drawn into it because it was, the more I got to know them and know the music and the background, the more I got drawn into it. But basically, I asked them, how do you record, and James would do all the guitars to a click track. Yeah. And then Lars would play drums, make a mistake, they'd punch in, and then, then they do the vocals, and then
tedious.
Bass player would overdub, and then Kirk would play solos for a week, and that's the album. Yeah. And I said, well, I can't do that. I said, I have everybody in the room, and they're going like, what? They didn't even know that existed because their only experience was that. That's what I mean. It's like, it wasn't out of ignorance or anything. That's all they knew. So I said, and I told them, I said, I do pre-production, So we sat in a room and went through all the songs. And I said I made changes. Like I got Jason to actually play bass rather than just the guitar riff.
Okay.
And stuff, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, well, and the reason why we record it is you kind of get a whole picture of what you're going to end up with, a small picture, but a snapshot.
Just sticking like a couple mics in the room as you go.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's like the idea is performance rather than just getting it good. You know, I explained, like I said, tempo's so critical. It, like, for instance, the way they did it, they couldn't change the tempo. They couldn't find a sweet spot. Like it took time to find where Sad But True, where it felt good. And you know what I mean?
And was that just taking runs at it over and over and over and over again?
Well, in pre-production, we found it.
Okay.
You know, and then it changed when we started recording by a beat or something, right? Because it changes when you end up doing that. So those were all the things that they saw the reason why when we proceeded, right? They learned.
Yeah.
Everything was, you see, the thing I was learning and they were learning. But the amazing thing is about those guys is once they were in with me, they never, not because of, they never gave a second thought working with me.
How long did that take to get to that point though?
Full confidence, probably 6 months.
Oh my God.
But it was individual, right? It was like, do you know, like,
well, just from watching the movie, like which was later than the period that you're talking about, but I mean, that's a lot of strong personalities and like a lot of clashing. And
well, like for instance, Kirk is a good example. You know, like he'd never been there when they were doing basics. Like actually, and
really,
what ended up happening is like because we would do full takes, ours would make a mistake, you know, and then we'd start again, and they're going like. Then they started going like, why can't you get through the song, Lars? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they got impatient and but once again, then they saw the outcome. Like I think after the first thing we recorded and they went in and we edited and then they went, oh, we get it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And with Kirk, the funny thing is there's the solo part of the film, right? And what it ended up happening is he came in, he thought like, oh, I'll bang this off in a couple of weeks, right? And it's like, he didn't have anything. He came in and just played, he was wanking. Mm-hmm. And what happened is I got the assistant to take the solos that when he wasn't thinking of, off all the takes and put it on cassette, and he listened to it. And that's where all the solos came from.
Oh, no kidding. Just the sort of the...
You see, he wasn't thinking about it. So he was just playing, which was great.
That's a good producer move right there.
I just had to adapt. Everything's about adapting and not being scared of the moment. And that comes down to the school. Mm-hmm. I'm not afraid to stick my neck out because I don't care what people think of me.
Right.
That's the biggest thing in my career is when I had the chance to be in a studio, I just didn't care what other people thought of me or, you know, or my abilities, because I saw that as a wall.
So when you go back to work with a band like that again, are you kind of like, were you nervous going and making another Metallica record because of it must have been draining? It must have taken a ton of time. That would be something to consider, I guess.
When we stopped when we mastered and we all went our separate ways. I mean, Randy Staub and I just said we're never going to
really
be in a room with guys. Yeah, and then unfortunately it became really big.
I'll say
we had no idea.
Really. There was no thought at the time like this.
Well, they did, and everybody said, you know, but you know, what it did to me personally and everything else, I couldn't do that again. But of course I did.
So how'd you get back? Why'd you do it again?
Well, because it was big, okay. You know, like, when you get that perspective, like of, when you're in it, you don't really know where it went. You know, like if you listen to nothing sounds like the Black Album.
No, I know. That's a very unique sounding record.
Yeah, nothing sounds like that. And that's, once again, they challenged me. And I challenged them.
Yeah.
Do you follow me? It becomes this thing that, like, so when you look back at it and you go like, yeah, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it ends up being all that work was obviously worth it.
Yeah, and I guess the time in between, you had time to just
Yeah.
all that
I
other
mean,
stuff.
they went on the road for 3 years.
Right. When you came back together, you were the bass player in the band, and that's
No, it was Load and Reload.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, you've done a ton of that stuff. Oh my God. So, yeah, I'm skipping ahead, but eventually.
So like Load and Reload.
Yeah.
They wanted to. They have lives in San Francisco and wives and kids.
Mm-hmm.
So they said we want to do it in San Francisco, but we want it to sound the same. And I said, well, I looked at the record plant in Sausalito, and the ceiling's about as high as this ceiling.
Oh yeah.
In the studio, right? It was great for Fleetwood Mac, but it's not for Metallica, right? I said, I can't. We can't make a record here. And they said, why? Well, the rooms. I said the room's the right size, but the ceiling's so low. There's no vibe here. It's dry as a bone. So what did they do?
Tore the ceiling out.
They built the studio.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Okay.
They raised the roof.
Wow.
And Metallica paid for it.
Oh my God. Good suggestion.
Yeah. So that was a meeting. And so Metallica paid for it.
Oh,
and they raised the ceiling up to like 20 feet or something.
And that's where you did those records.
That's where we did Load.
Okay. Amazing.
And still, even though the same EQs, the same mics, the same drums, everything, it never sounds the same because that whole process of it's just not the same. Not because of the room.
Yeah.
You see, this is the point. It's not like a lot of people, they go like, why do you let people see what you do and tell people the mics and stuff? Because they're never going to get what I get because of my perspective. Do you follow me?
Of course. Yeah.
You can have the same equipment. You can use the same EQs, same mic placement. It's not going to be, it might be kind of like it. And we couldn't even match ourselves.
Right.
Because it's based on that time and everything.
Yeah. In the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, you've taken some really interesting kind of left turns. Like you've done Michael Buble, working with Jann Arden, Tragically Hip.
Well, you see, yeah, but you see, the thing is like with Michael Buble. So he worked with the producer and he had this song called Everything. And, you know, he's managed by Bruce Allen, my manager. And Michael thought the song was great. And the producer said, no, it's a piece of crap. I'm not going to record it. So Bruce told Michael, well, I'm going to get you to put the studio with Bob. And Buble, the guy that did Metallica, I don't get it. And he said, yeah, just trust me. That's the previous stuff, the jingles and everything. I'd recorded strings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody knows that they think Metallica was where I started.
Right.
I had 20 years of being an engineer and being in the room.
Totally.
I knew how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. You get the right musicians. I hired the right musicians. And we did a couple takes and Michael Buble went, oh.
Where did you do that record?
It was the Warehouse.
The Warehouse in Vancouver. Okay.
Yeah. Because that was basically Little Mountain rebuilt. John Vertasek and Ron obviously designed that.
What about working with the Tragically Hip? Like that's another band that like you're walking into a bit of a hornet's nest there, I'd imagine, as far as like guys that have known each other since probably grade 6, and you're a bit of an outsider. They've got a sound, they've got a reputation, they've got a whole history already, and then you have to come in and like that's a tricky production gig in a lot of ways.
Well, you know, initially when, you know, once again, we did pre-production, which kind of you find a way to do it. But really, I think at that point, you know, knowing Gord and basically he wanted something new.
Yeah.
Right. You know, because they, you know.
Was it their idea to work with you?
Yeah. You know, basically, actually Gord flew to Maui.
Okay.
And we had lunch together.
Yeah.
And he just kind of told me, you know, we just talked and hit it off right away. We talked about our families, but we talked about what I do and everything, you know. And of course, once, you know, everybody has like, he's the guy that did Metallica, you know, and then, but they knew me as the Payolas, right? Mm-hmm. You know, they knew it wasn't all about Metallica, right? So then we just have this great meeting and we hang out for a couple of days. And then I go there and do pre-production. And
did you do it at their place out in Kingston?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't Kingston. We ended up, where did we record it? We recorded it. In Toronto.
Oh, in Toronto. Okay. Yeah.
No, we didn't use their studio. The second time was their studio. But basically, I just helped them kind of focus on what was best about them.
Okay.
I mean, the great thing about the Tragically Hip, it's like the Stones. There's a sound to the band playing together. Now you can, like the history, I know a lot about the Stones, and it's like the Stones can, Start Me Up was a song that they'd been working on for 10 years. And they ended up with started. It was a reggae song, right? Mm-hmm. The Tragically Hip don't have that thing, right? So basically I just said, you need more of this. But and they didn't have the perspective, because I was coming in as not only as a producer but also a songwriter, and just going like, what it is it's not smarts, it's wisdom. They'd made like 6 records, I've made 30 records, and you learn patterns and you learn what you have to do to make a record.
Yeah.
And they weren't hip to kind of that.
Okay, interesting.
No pun intended, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I do.
Yeah, and so I just brought that. And World Container was really kind of easy, and we had a lot of fun.
Was there a lot of pre-production though, like getting to that point?
No, just regular. Okay. I think it was a week of pre-production, and and they all play and they have a sound. They do. And they love the sounds, and they love, it was fine. And the second album, We Are the Same, it changed a little bit because they kind of were in a different place. Mm-hmm. And, basically what ends up happening with me is I figure out about the band and kind of in a way where it comes from, sort of. And I end up, maybe sometimes mistakenly go with that the strong, the alpha male, and the alpha male's Gord.
Right.
And we started becoming friends, and he said, I want to go to different places. Right. Yep. And then the writing thing, who brings what? It was, I don't know. So Gord was writing a lot on his own, bringing it, and that was different.
Was he doing stuff other than just the lyrics? Was he writing music too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that changed, right? And of course, I like that because it's melodic and stuff like that. So it was a little more difficult to do. And then we cut it at the house and at their studio, and then we went to Maui. And basically the way I work when I do vocals, I can't really finish a song until the vocals and the lyrics are there. Yeah. And then you know what to do, right? So, they weren't there. They came out to kind of come in and do some overdubs later. We had basic tracks and stuff. And so I'm working with Gordon. I'm doing all these backgrounds because it's suggested and I just do it, right? Yeah. And they came and they're going like, you did all the backgrounds? Like we did work without them.
Yes.
Which is always not good, right? When you do work with not everybody there, it's like they go like, why did you do this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that caused a bit of stuff. So
did you have to backtrack and like get rid of that stuff, or?
No, we we kind of, I satisfied them, etc.
Yeah.
But it rocked the boat, definitely.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But it's funny because I talked to Johnny Fay, because he played on some of the Gordon Bob stuff that's just come out. Have you heard it?
I haven't heard it yet, but I heard it's cool. I want to check it out.
Well, there's 3 songs that are released. You can hear them on YouTube or iTunes. The full album's May, but we're releasing songs over 6 months.
Okay.
Anyway, as it turned out, just talking to him because of the release of the Gordon Bob, they've all come to be quite enamored with that album.
Oh, nice.
Right? Now they get it. And they had like a whole pilot group of songs that were bits and pieces that they wanted to develop, but we were like 10 songs in, and I didn't want to work on another 6 songs. And, so what I did is, why don't we make those 6 songs a kind of like a one song?
Oh, yeah.
Like a journey, right? And they went for it.
Okay.
And then they freaked out about it.
Really?
But it's actually amazing.
So who is that project exactly? Like, who's all in it?
The band.
Just everybody. The whole hit.
Just everybody, okay. But
that's a new thing. You've got this record in the can with Paul Rogers. That's not out, is it?
No, it's coming out.
That's exciting. Is it kick ass or what?
Yeah, somebody else did the basic tracks and stuff. And Randy Staub who's friends with the family, because I think Randy's wife works financially with Paul Rogers and stuff. And Randy was supposed to mix it, and Randy phones me and he goes, Bob, this album ain't finished.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's So he says, would you work with Paul Rogers? I said, yeah, I'll do it for free. Yeah, I just wish I did. I just wanted to be in the room with Paul Rogers. Right. So basically, I just went through each song with Keith and Chris.
Okay.
And Paul was there, and Cynthia, his wife, who really started producing the album. And we just touched up every song.
That's kind of a cool way to work, actually. Like coming in at that late stage and just like pulling up a song and just like, how can we make this a complete work?
Yeah, they had worked with, the guy that did it, Ray Roper, he did an excellent job.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But it's a certain perspective. And, in the early days when I was a mixer, you'd get handed stuff that you go like, it's not quite done. So you talk to them and you just learn how to fix stuff up. Yep. Let's put it that way. So, yeah, so I just had a blast. And there was one obvious choice was that there's barely any kind of like what I would consider standard stuff for Bad Company and Free, right? I'm a Free fan.
Sure, me too.
Hence the guitar, the Paul Kossoff guitar, right? And so I got Keith to play like licks all the way through the songs. And Paul's going like, I haven't done that in like decades.
Why not?
Do you follow me?
Yeah.
So right away he loved Keith, and Keith's the guy that just like, Keith Scott is amazing, right? So 2 days with Keith and then a day and a half with Chris, and we did all the songs.
Amazing.
And they were blown away by both. And Randy mixed it, and it sounds great.
Killer.
Oh, and I did with Buble on the last album, we did a duet with Willie and Michael.
Yeah.
And basically, because Willie, he actually sang it twice. He never sings things.
Wow.
He spent a day singing it, and he didn't like it, and he did it again.
Okay.
And it's staggering.
Did they actually do it together?
Basically what happened is we cut the track and we needed a solo. And I said, well, I'm friends with Willie, and I'll just see if he wants to do a solo, right?
Yeah.
And then Michael says, do you think he'd want to sing on it with me?
Awesome.
And basically when I suggested it to them, and they were kind of the manager and everybody was kind of hum-ho and stuff. And I said, you know what? I'm going to send the track we have. They heard the track and they all phoned back in like 3 minutes, and they said, yeah, Willie wants to do it.
Wicked.
So he actually sang it twice.
Wow.
And Annie, his wife, said he never does that.
I've heard, yeah, he just waltzes in and you got
to hear it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's crazy on the new Les Buble album.
Okay.
And Willie does a solo and plays guitar through it. It's an amazing track.
In Maui, you've got this great setup, right? Like this, is it a full studio setup?
It was.
Yeah.
It isn't now.
It's not? Did you tear it down, or what happened to the...
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Really, it was that the budgets changed. Yeah. And to fly a band over there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And
so just people weren't coming.
And even the studio to keep the, what it ended up being is like, because I do projects, I just don't mix. Maybe if I was just a mixer, I'd keep it going, send it to me, blah, 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 blah. But because I record and produce, it just sat there empty. It was like, $10,000 for air conditioning every month, right? So I kind of closed it down.
Okay. Is it on your property? Like it's where you live?
Yeah.
Okay.
What happened is I just built a mix room.
Yeah.
Okay. John designed it. It sounded, I got the last 6,000 SSL made.
Wow.
Which is the board I used on the Black album.
Yep.
And it's a great mix room. He tuned it. It was fantastic. And then I recorded Vuka Salt.
Oh yeah.
They wanted to record it, and basically I did it in a house. I didn't think people would want to come to Maui. I was wrong.
Yeah, man. No shit.
Yeah. And so after Veruca Salt, I converted my garage to the studio.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's an amazing sounding room. That's where I do work now. Now I do basically on my laptop with all my gear around it.
Yeah.
Like most people are making records right now.
Yeah.
Do
you still have a shit ton of gear, or have you started let that?
Oh, fuck. Yeah. I can barely get into my studio.
Love it.
I've got all the gear.
Yeah.
Now I just use the plugins, right? And my theory on the plugins here is like, so I'm a big Neve guy.
Uh-huh.
Now the 10E1 is very close, but it isn't the same. But it's still, if you just get out of the comparing thing and you use it,
very useful.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
All the things, and a 250 is like, I've got a 250 and it's hissy and it breaks, and now it's 179 and I got a 250. You know what I mean? So I'm a big fan of that.
I like it too. Yeah, I've got a API here, and same with the API, like with the Universal Audio plugins. They're cool, but they don't sound exactly like what this does, but it's a different thing.
You just forget about that, and you just, I was talking to Mike Fraser about this. He's going like, I don't know if I can mix in the box and blah, blah, blah. And I told him my story about perspective. And I said, Mike Fraser, you're going to get to the same place because that's how you hear it. He said, well, I never thought about that.
Because you're Mike Fraser.
Yes. It'll always sound like Mike Fraser because he's amazing. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate the time, and it's been great talking to you, and nice to meet you finally, actually, too.
Yeah, it's good to meet you. I heard you were at the warehouse a lot.
Yeah. I before I moved to Nashville, so like I worked at the factory a ton, and then that place sort of shut down. It's kind of back now, but it shut down, and then I ended up working a lot at the warehouse and loved it.
Yeah.
It's
a great studio.
Oh my God, it's so amazing. Yeah, if I could just make records there all day, every day, I'd be perfectly happy.
Yeah.
But I can't.
I like the windows too.
I know.
It's not a dark place, right? It's basically the best studio I've ever worked in.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And that console's insane. I love that. I love the way that
it's you have to try hard to make something sound bad in that console.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's special.
Anyway, it was fun.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay. Have a good day. Aloha.
Thank you for listening, everybody. That was my conversation with Bob Rock. What a pleasure to speak with that guy. Hope you enjoyed listening to it, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. It's going to be the final episode of season 6. Looking forward to bringing it to you, and we shall see you then. Over and out. Music Makers and Soul Shakers is produced at the Hen House Studio in Nashville, Tennessee by Steve Dawson. Please remember to subscribe to the show and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find more info on this episode, including show notes and an audio playlist at makersandshakerspodcast.com. Thanks again to our amazing sponsors this season, Ear Trumpet Labs, Union Tube and Transistor, Black Mountain Picks, Isotope, and Spectra 1964. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.